welcome everybody to our joint EETech GGC webinar. We have done this webinar for the last several years. This is one of my favorite studies in the entire engineering marketing community. And I love talking about the results of this study. I've been following it with my good friend Steve Cholas here for a good 20 or 30 years. We're not going to say how long it's been. But I'm really excited to partner with EETech again and bring this to our community. Our Engineering Insights report today is presented by Steve Cholas. Steve is Executive Director of Enterprise Solutions for EETech. That's a very impressive title, and he is a very impressive person. So with that, Steve and I are going to tag team this a little bit, and I'll be the color commentator, adding play-by-play to his presentation. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to you, Steve, to go ahead and get started.
Thanks, Joel. And I do think it's probably been a little bit over 30 years, Joel, but
well, we're not going to say. We're just not going to say.
Yeah, well, I've already put it out there. And, thanks everybody for attending today, and thanks for the opportunity, Joel. I greatly appreciate it. I think the best way to open this up would be to say this. We're going to take a look at the fourth quarter, coming out of the fourth quarter 2025, kind of the state of mind of engineering. I personally, since I've been in this business, I've already put it out there. I think, since 1983, I can honestly say I don't think I've seen such a dynamic shift and pivot, just everything dynamically with this market that's occurred, even beyond COVID, in my opinion. So, I know we're going to have a chance to get into a lot of those things. Who's EETech? I'll make it really quick. You can read this as I'm talking, but basically we're a technology company. We build an ecosystem, for solutions that are designed to support the electronic industry, for the people that are engineering and technologists. And we've done so very robustly over the last 9 years. So we do everything from building communities. We're sitting on like 8.5 million members in communities globally. And we do digital presence in terms of, bringing to bear, much more resilience and capabilities for websites, design tools and such. And we do data and research and what have you. So that in essence, and I get the chance to dabble with all of that within our company. I think I'll turn it back to you, Joel, so you get a chance to talk about yourself.
Thanks. I was kind of interested in hearing how you would introduce us, but we are a 32-year-old agency that focuses on the B2B sector. In particular, within that, we have always done engineer-to-engineer communications. That's why this study is so fascinating to me personally and to our agency and our audience. We really want to understand how engineers make buying decisions, how engineers find new products and new companies to work with. And that's really what we're going to talk about today. And it falls right into the sweet spot of what we do as an agency.
Yeah, perfect lineup on that, and great explanation of what GGC does. And I have had the pleasure for all the years to work with you. About the study real quick, methodology of it, we do it every year, like I said, for the past 9 years. This year, we're going to take a look at one slice of it, and that is the little bit over 1,000 qualified engineers of multiple disciplines globally. We will not be covering the inclusion of China. I'll specify that. And if you have questions about why that is, you could ask, at the end.
And before you go on, I do want to interrupt.
Yeah,
my first
ahead.
Of many interruptions. I just want to call out that this has 1,000 respondents, not 1,000 people surveyed, but that's one of the reasons why I think this is such a great study. When you see a lot of these studies, it's 150, 200 people with 1,000 responses here. There's just a huge amount of data that EETech has to present to us, and that's very robust information. So I'm excited.
Thanks for that. Thanks for that. I think you're spot on. You and I have talked about those kind of things over the years. And thanks to Tara. Tara heads up our research division for us. She's the one responsible for bringing in all these respondents and such. The good thing with 1,000 respondents, it enables you to project as averages and insight, I think, without having to worry about a specific audience, if you will. But we can talk about those things. 3 areas we're going to take a look at: the engineer, her and him himself, what they're dealing with coming out of the fourth quarter 25. What does that carry over into the design process? Those intricacies and details within the design process we'll take a look at. And then, of course, sourcing. How do they end up getting informational needs, product, what are their preferences as it aligns into the design process. This is a shorter version. I will say that you could go out to eetech.com and a full version is there for request. You'll get a chance to see. So I, kind of kept it down to probably half the amount of slides. That way we have plenty of discussion for my partner, Joel, to act as John Madden and pop in and out. I mentioned earlier, you want to have a good sampling of what's average market is aligned to the growth and such, in industries. North America and Europe are, basically represent about 60% of the respondent base. And you can see the rest here to the left up in these areas here. India has been a fluctuation. We're going to focus next year again on India and try to bump that number up a little bit as see how things play out. But I think this covers pretty much as an average. It aligns with the growth industries as far as regions that are obtaining those kind of dominance in the markets. So it gives you a good example. The industries align to those engineers. What do they work in? You can clearly see here, and you'll be able to hover over and see if needed the industries. And I think if you take a look at the top 5 core industries, these 5 in here, they represent multiple studies as far as balancing up with them. Also, you can go from a McKinsey to some of the industry studies besides ours. There's only a couple others, but they kind of align. So I think we pretty well represented the markets that are driving the market as a whole. I will point out data centers. Yeah, that number is low, 2.5%. But think about data centers. If you include the hyperscalers, you really have 3 or 4 that are dominating the market at an 80% clip. So data centers, should that mid-market open up, we'll include more on that. But right now, that's an adequate number in my opinion.
Well, the other part about it, Steve, is that a lot of people, even though they're not building their own data centers, almost all of our clients in this space are targeting data centers and trying to find ways to sell to the suppliers and the sub-suppliers and the system builders for data centers. So other than Mil-Aero, that's probably the hottest market out there right now, even though it's only 2.5% of this slide.
Yeah, and I think if you look at the global number in terms of, to my point, who are the hyperscalers or mid-market scalers, you can see the number is not as dramatic. But I think the number represents fairly. Thanks for pointing that out. And then, of course, you want to keep that average projectable, right? You take a look at company sizes. We don't want to be heavily loaded in the Fortune enterprise level. We have an adequate amount. You're only looking at, I'll bring this point forward. If you look at the European Union and North America predominantly, let's focus on the US for a moment. Probably about 68% currently of companies in manufacturing and technology related to high tech across are companies that are under 100 employees. So to that point, it's really important for the study, again, to take a look and cover all sizes of companies to be able to project into an average. So you can clearly see here that it's split pretty evenly and gives us projectability. The other thing is that we are dealing with currently an era of change dramatically, right? Certainly we'll start with persona. Engineering has been overtaken in terms of an age group at the Millennial Z, which we'll call Millennial Z, right? And we're sitting at about 60% of the engineering audience globally outside of China. Again, I'll make a point about China. China's numbers are a little bit higher than that, and there's reasons behind that, but we're sitting at about 60% Europe, North America, rest of the world outside of China to be Millennial Z. That brings forward, I think, a lot of dynamics, which we'll talk about and get a chance to see the differences between the personas as they have responsibility in design and supply chain and product build. So, and I'll always point that out separately on the slide to get a chance to really understand it. All right, so let's peel back these engineers' heads, what's going on between their ears, and, coming out of school and they enter the market, if you will, engineering is pretty much, and they can check all that apply in the multiplicity of specialties of engineering segmentation that they go into or that they're responsible for as a specialty. Most of them are double E's. They could pick multiple levels here, but you could see what I think us suppliers are starting to deal with out here in a more significant way in the last 2 years. That is, engineers are not just double E's. The collision between the different technology sectors and the specialization, be it mechanical engineering, certainly EE engineering and hardware engineering and such. Engineers are forced once they get into field to take on certain specialties. So
Yeah, I thought this was pretty interesting too. I mean, when I started, test engineering was
mhm.
a big category. It doesn't even show anymore here. It's getting much more diverse in terms of areas of specialty
Yeah,
from what they used to be.
well, we've seen the applications of engineering and development. They cross over each other. Lighting would be
Yep.
a great example
Yep.
between solid state and such, right?
Yep.
But I think where the big differences start to occur is they move into areas of expertise of interest. What is the difference between Millennial Z, the dominant 60%, and Career Pro? You take a look here and you can clearly see areas where you might anticipate AI integration. Take a look down here, right? Control system programming. You have control and automation, industrialization that's occurring. A lot of the younger engineers, Millennial Z, they'll pick that up as a focus. And of course, data. A lot of these younger Millennial Z, now keep in mind, these are 20 plus 22 years and less in the market, but that does distinguish them as a Millennial Z. And things like data and analytics, greater control programming, right? AI integration. Hey, that doesn't surprise me necessarily. That's the two big differences, or three big differences, really. You can take a look here. Um, Career pros have a tendency to kind of settle in. We always look at analog. Analog is a great market to be in right now, especially if you're an ADI or TI. Right now, analog is blowing it out, right? And career pros have kind of settled in that old black science type of engineering. Joe, you know that, right? You've been around analog, even though doesn't directly relate at times to test T&M, but you certainly are aware of how that black science has always been there under the clouds, right? And it's a hard technology, but this is where the engineers find their interest. And again, I'm going to go back one slide. This is kind of their specialty, but then they migrate as they get into further in their careers as time is, and they have areas of interest, and they can pick up the five here. So this is pretty well a force multiplier to kind of give you a pretty good clear where their heads are at. Okay. On top of all that, they got challenges, just like all of us, right? And I think this starts to separate even further career pros and Millennial Z, because you can see here, I think anything over, and Terry would always remind me, I think if we look at anything 5 or 6% based on this respondent base, I think we can call it flat. If it gets up into 7, 8+%, then you can look at a distinguishable, notable difference between the two. But I think we keep an eye on these areas where Millennial Z. Joel, did you have a comment? I just heard you.
Well, yeah, I think
Yeah.
I think that, look at the third one there, keeping current with the latest technology. So that's been on the list for years in these studies, but it keeps, bubbling up more and more to the top. And as a marketer, that really just reminds us that the
archives.
yeah, sorry, if somebody could go on mute, that'd be great.
Explanation.
It just reminds us that
You
as a
got it.
marketer, the greenfield, evergreen kind of content is always going to be something that's relevant, because people are having trouble keeping up with all of this change, all of this specialization. It's pretty fast moving, and marketers are in a great position to provide that tutorial expertise and tutorial content to help engineers address that number 3 problem that they've got. Oh, Steve, you're on mute. We don't want you on mute.
That absolutely kicked me into mute.
Yeah,
or
there you go.
Somehow, Eddie, but I apologize. These challenges, have stayed consistent. They ebb and flow a little bit, but I think there's some other ones that are starting to impact some of this stuff, like staying on schedule. Well, you got global supply chain instability. That is a huge issue. The collision between securing the proper and adequate sourcing becomes a core requirement now between both engineering and procurement slash supply chain. Shifting customer and user expectations. You think of the customers that you're providing services and product to. Oh my gosh. I mean, that customer and user expectation is pivoting so rapidly, like country of origin and things like that start to move things around. And then, of course, your labor skills, and that's key. And I hear that from some of the schools when we get a chance to interview and talk to some of the students in the engineering schools. But some of the ones Go ahead. Yeah.
Well, I was just going to say, I know for some of our mil aero clients, counterfeit components at the bottom, third, fourth from the bottom is a concern. I know that was a new question that you added a few years ago. I thought
Mm-hmm.
that that might bubble up over time, but it stayed pretty consistent as a minor concern, minor challenge.
Well, that's that ebbs and flows. Counterfeit. I think the last number I heard, and nobody can quote me on this, but I'll try to come back to you, Joe, and give you a number. But I think it's generally somewhere beyond 2 to 4% of product has counterfeit components
Hmm.
that are constantly being uncovered. And I think ECIA would have that number, but that's the number I recall.
Good.
Um, okay, so we know they got challenges. Excuse me there. There we go. So let's take all of that and move it into the design process. Here's what I'll kind of point out things to kind of keep in mind in the back of your mind on this. And that would be something along the lines of omni-channel opportunities and in sourcing. You've got so many channels of content and informational being jammed out. It's very loud, it's very noisy out there. So what are the engineers thinking about that? What are they doing about that? Or what's their utility in that type of environment, especially with the millennial Z? Is there a big shift and pivot between more, career pros? What does the digital literacy look like? What I mean by that is how are they consuming content and information from these multiple channels that are hovering or constantly coming at them? We'll take a look at that. Digital literacy is key, and of course, AI. And let's not forget the leadership C suite. Never before have I heard in the last 2 or 3 years, even before COVID. I'll go before COVID, back in 2020. When I would ask questions about how is the C-suite affecting your particular job performance and opportunity and success rate, I'd ask that to engineers, and you get very benign answers. Now the answers are very concerning. AI has driven a lot of that. I'll give commentary on that, but CapEx is not an easy allocation right now for some of the C-suite, given the dynamics we're up against. Okay. I made a lot of noise and mentioned just a moment ago about sources of information. Some pivots and shifts here, and I know Joel's going to have some comments. So you shut me up whenever you need to, Joel. But I think clearly you see the distinguishable difference in areas for Millennial Z, right? And we'll start at the top. Let's start with search engines. Search engines, up until 2 years ago, were always the number one by any of the research studies put out there in an aided list. Search engines, everybody was thinking Google. I go in, this is where I'll start, I'll bookmark, what have you. Over the course of the last few years, it has emerged. Certainly, AI has spewed into this thing a big pivot and shift. And that is the fact that engineers in their sourcing activity has changed, and they're going to more manufacturer websites. We can offer opinions on that, more so for the career pros, if you will. But I want to point out engineering forums and communities, and Joel's got some great questions. He hit me this morning on that, but engineering forums and communities, they are always moving at a pretty rapid pace. But I will say this: in the last 3 years, where they've elevated and surpassed as an informational entity, for engineers. It's not dramatic, but it is ranking above search engines. So, and I think AI has certainly driven the heck out of that. Now we've separated. We call out LLMs here, right? So that represents the AI portion, of course, but that's a new question. We've added that. So this gives you, along the fact there's multiple channels of information that we're all trying to push out into the market. How do engineers isolate those to the more preferred? And I think you clearly see here, it's the manufacturing side, engineering forums and communities, very key. Engineers love to talk back and forth with each other. It's almost like they continued their fraternities and sororities when they come out of colleges. But you can see it here again, colleagues and coworkers, they talk. Thus, social media down here is sitting at about 30%, especially you can see here on the millennial Zs, right?
Yeah,
But
that
I
really
think,
blew me away. So it's really interesting. People talk about social media
mhm.
quite a bit, obviously, but it blows me away that over 30%, 31% of the Millennial Z group is finding companies and products on social media. So it clearly is not a secondary strategy, a secondary channel for us marketers. It's a big deal, and we have to find ways to make our social media presence more engaging, not just posting some of the routine things that we typically do. It's a primary channel for us going forward. And I'm like you, Steve. The fact that search engines is third on this list is mind blowing. The fact that Google could be replaced is just incredible. But last year was the first time that manufacturer website searches, I believe it was last year, was the first time, appeared above search engines. Again, as a marketer, what does that mean? Your website has to be great. Your website search tool has to be effective and function well. You have to have live chat. You have to have effective knowledge bases on your site. So people who are not investing heavily into their own manufacturer online presence on their site, they're missing the boat for what engineers are looking for.
Yeah, without a doubt. I think the big statement with that I would add on, and that is, are you site ready? I talk to a lot of suppliers, both distributors and component manufacturers, and there's a lot of, if that conversation starts in the marketing side, utilizing the awareness portion, and then you want to move into engagement, which is essentially is your message. You want them to do something. What is it they're going to do? And I can tell you that there's a pretty good percentage of programs that people want to initiate, but they're not site ready to activate and to capitalize on that. And that becomes key. And engineers are extremely sensitive, and they look at ease of use and systems within the manufacturers or the component websites. And we'll see some of that.
And don't waste my time either as an engineer.
No,
right?
there is no time.
They don't have any, they don't have any time. So if you're going to put up information out there that's incomplete, or for God's sakes, don't make me register to get a data sheet, don't waste their time.
Yeah.
So Steve, let me
Good
ask you a
point.
question. Do you connect the dots? Do you connect the dots here between number two, engineering forums and communities, where people are talking to their colleagues, and the co-worker colleague line with a very, very high Millennial Z response, over 50%? I think those two things are related, right?
They are. Here's where I think there's maybe a little bit of nuancing that we have to do, and Tara and I will discuss this. If you look at meaning forums, communities, co-workers, colleagues, and we look at language models, or social media, what is the difference? Is an engineering forum, a community, a social media experience? Could be. Tara and I go back and forth about something. We're going to bring more clarity to social media, engineering forums, in communities, and we'll peel back that AI assistant within the general search. Is that actually what's being replaced? To me, it's what it's saying. I go into Google and prompt it immediately just to use AI from it. So there is a correlation. I think we need to do a little bit more clarity for everybody on that, which we will. Does that make sense, Joel?
Yeah, it does. I mean, we're seeing people spending more time on Reddit and on your communities, and on I heard about SparkWire recently is another new one, and I just think that these communities and the need to do shortcuts by asking coworkers and colleagues how they solved problems before, that's where a lot of these conversations are going to take place, and marketers have to figure out a way to get involved. Some of the advertising that we've looked at on Reddit, not really quite ready for prime time in a B2B environment, but I think that's going to start coming too.
No, it'll change at a blink of an eye, Joel. It'll change at a blink of an eye. So if this is where they have a propensity to kind of move as entering their source extraction of information, what is the type of information they want? Well, no surprise here, and kind of everybody agrees between the two personas that data sheets, app notes, reference designs, and such, the technical aspect of them, enabling them to get on with their job and do their stuff that they need. But I would not dismiss down here online design tools. We're going to see more of that. Even though types of information ranks here, the number really is, what are we sitting here? We're average about, let's call it 36% on design tools, online design tools. I'll call those out and when they use them, why they want to use them, or what they're using. But that number actually, it will be a little higher when you isolate tools by themselves. But I'll point out here, so this little blip right here, right, this documentation, we're going to find out a little bit later here, but documentation, authenticity, authentication, compliance, AVL status, these type of things come into play more robustly, certainly currently given the geopolitical issues that we're dealing with. So documentation, and that assignment will end up ultimately more, I think, with Millennial Z than Career Pro, but let's keep an eye on that. Was there a question, or was that just somebody coming new in, I think?
Just somebody coming in. I mean,
Okay.
I will say, and we talked
Yeah,
about
let
it
me go back
earlier,
here. Yeah.
that's that the data sheets, it's surprising how many companies that you're looking at their website and it's tough to find the data sheet. I mean, it's not on the product page. It's not an easy click and it breaks the Steve Jobs rule of one click and we might think the data sheets aren't important, but for the engineering audience, put that data sheet front and center and you'll make them happy.
You've got lots of companies out there that is their only business to provide for technical specifiers and engineers and purchasing, and that would be
Mhm.
data sheets,
Yeah.
and certainly have notes. I will say here, I'd like to see much more reference design availability if it's available, if you do it as a customer. The semiconductor companies, I get that, right? And some big connector companies, but reference designs are constantly being brought up when I talk with engineers or sit with them on panels. And then one final thought on this, and we'll move on. In this type of information, if this is what they're looking at for and where they'll go, you can only focus really on, 5 things at a time. I think, from an investment standpoint to accurately give you positioning, but I would certainly take a look hard at these top 5 areas and make sure that you are site ready with immediate, easy. It doesn't have to be one click always, but certainly no more than 3 to get to these areas. And that's where I say reference designs sometimes are the hardest things to find. And I don't know why. It just is. So relative to this, there's always more. And here's another distinguishable difference between the millennial and, well, I'm going to pop it out right down here, right? Community builds and workshops, interactive. They want more of that. Well, that's kind of really been the core. I'm not going to get pitchy, but EETech's community group, represents our media assets, not the other portions of our company, that was entirely built on forums and communities from bottom up. And being in the publishing media business for 40 years, but back in the day, we always went top down. We know we'll provide, we'll send out, we'll cover. Well, as time moved on, especially with the advent of the internet, things start to move bottom up. And that's how EETech was, created, along with all the assets. So we keep very, very focused on that. That is a very big number. It's almost 40% say they want more community builds and workshops in the interactive digitally. So you can clearly see a difference there. I mentioned tools. So you can see here, right? This is the type of manufacturing tools that would align with the required information that they want. Let me go back just a little bit, right? Data sheets, app notes, reference design, tech content, and such, right? Then they want more here. They're indicating the things that they want to see more of to help them on their job. Well, tools can apply to that. CAD models, certainly, and design files, reference designs, and schematics, right? These are types of tools that you can go all the way down here, price and availability, what have you. Bill of material tools. This is a sampling of the tools, probably the most prolific utilized as an average. Again, this speaks to web ready, site ready. Are you? You're going to spend a fortune on your marketing efforts, as you should. You're building brand equity, but you want that engagement once they hit the digital environment of destination, right? And that's you've got to have. So use this data and think about, here's what they're saying as an average. It'll be different for different industries and technologies, but as an average overall rolled up, this is the areas you need to kind of focus on to adapt with your customer as they adapt. And I think that's kind of the key momentum moving forward.
One of the
Joel?
things I'll point out,
Yeah.
the difference here that struck me is the top one on the age, the different responses between career and millennial Z for white papers. So we're, as an agency and as marketers, we're in the white paper business. We write white papers all day long. But one of the things that we've noticed, particularly with AI and particularly the way it's affecting search, is that white papers, when they're written to appeal to that early stage researcher, top of the funnel, I'll be honest, we're really trying to move more and more away from that to programs that are creating middle of the funnel, uncovering middle of the funnel buyers. So for many people, white papers are too early stage for the marketing cycle, and they're looking for ways to develop content and engagement that are more aligned with middle of the funnel than top of the funnel white papers. So
Yeah.
and the difference in the age group responses there really is indicative to me of what's going on out there. It really illustrates why white papers are becoming, they're certainly important, they're certainly critical, but they're not the driver that they once were.
So let me take a little different approach and opinion and counter you a little bit there, Joel.
All right.
I think there is we as researchers and providers of information to them, we need to be very clear so that there is a distinguishable difference between a white paper and an in-depth technical article. I moved back 2 slides, look at the desired information, look at that top number. That tells me that I'm not really sure. This is what it tells me. How is a white paper completely different? Maybe the length of the white paper. So I think there needs to be, and we'll do a little bit digging into this, Tara and I, when, as we move forward throughout the year. But in-depth technical articles, I think, white papers, written tutorials, things like that, I think they start to blur each other. That's my opinion.
They
I
totally
think
do. And
yeah.
if we write something, it always is based on that problem solution formula. So whether it's an article, whether you call it an article, whether you call it a white paper, it still has to, for the engineer to find value, it still has to have that problem solution theme to it, and it can't really be a product push. So I just thought the age difference there to respond to this was different. And I don't want to keep us from the AI slides. There's a lot of interesting things
No,
in
no,
there
no, no.
that
We should.
that we certainly need to cover too.
Well, I'll make one last comment on this. I don't think the jury's completely still out. You look at Millennial Z and the numbers, they are. And when you look at the big pullouts like the Career Pro and application white paper to the conversation we're talking about, I would say this. The more seasoned, the more years in position, the more senior level of engineering, maybe as you find yourself into, you're staying with certain things. What's your responsibility within the company? I don't think Millennial Z's is completely flushed out. We're going to see these numbers move, right? So I think I'll make this comment. The opportunity from a marketing standpoint of suppliers and services to the design engineering and engineering technologist should be clearly considering or including the difference in the persona base, right? And I don't think it's shifted to that yet. It hasn't. I don't see Millennial Z tooling versus Career Pro or any type of analogy with that. We're clearly looking at, so my point is, I think Millennial Z will start to balance out as you spend more time. And these numbers, as they move up into Career Pro, if you will, we may find lessened or even more. Millennial Z's coming out of school may grow more.
You're right.
Here's the design tools that we talked about. So here's a good example, again, focus on the top 5, but another indicator that we've got, take a look here, Joel. Millennial Z, clearly,
Yep.
more than 4 out of 10 want LLM models on the application. And we can go into the applications later. We will here shortly, but I think this starts to, speak very heavily. And you look at go ahead, Joel.
Well, it is interesting. Look at the quote tool section at the bottom. As marketers, we're always pushing people to, do you want to quote? Do you want to quote? And that's not necessarily the best call to action to lead with, certainly.
Well, these are quote tools that I would say this is, again, these are engineers and technologists that work at customers of ours, right? So it's why we just bought a tool company, a bomb company, Breadboard, right? It's only one of 5 really that are utilized out there, and that is in the mid-market, moving into the enterprise level, certainly with the EMS market, and those are very prolific out there. So, which I would look as a quote tool and bomb tool, kind of they run close to each other, but the quote tool itself, I think things will get better. But think about quoting. Do you need the quote tool, or is this a matter of how quickly you respond? If I need a digital quoting platform, is that a tool or is that a platform service that I can incorporate from you? I don't know.
Unclear.
Okay,
Right.
figure it out. Figure it out there. AI. Well, you're probably gonna have a lot of questions on this one, I think, Joel. But I will say
Yeah, I'm
this:
looking at some of the chat questions that are coming in. Plus,
it,
I'm looking at the chat questions a lot on AI.
yeah, it's clear. It's clear. I mean, AI as a utilization. Again, we're going to look at AI as our customers use them, meaning the OEMs and the EMS companies who all of us sell to or you sell to as service providers. This is the utilization. And between the two, yeah, you got a 20% differential. I think a lot more responsibilities move this way. I think educational. I have a chance to talk to some schools sometimes, the engineering schools. I got a couple favorites, UT, Purdue, Marquette, and a couple others. But the incorporation over the last 4 or 5 years, especially the last year and a half of AI, large language model tool classes, has elevated. So I think we're going to see more and more adoption of this, but it's clear it's here and it's widely been adopted. And to what level do they use it? And I'm going to slow it down here because I think we clearly see some big deltas here, right, between millennials and career pros. But AI, given engineers multiple disciplines, multiple responsibilities in the areas that they have to work through, where are they utilizing AI? Well, engineers kind of touch a lot of different design cycles, right? But this starts to line it up. So, and I'll give examples. I think the next one, but I'll stop for a minute for any questions on this one from you, Joel.
No, I look, marketing people are clearly struggling with how AI is affecting search and content development. This really underscores the role of AI in driving real engineering work at a functional level, way beyond
Yeah.
what maybe marketing people are using AI for right now. So it is embedded throughout the entire design process very effectively, very aggressively.
AI has become, a quiet standard. It's not a future bet anymore. It's just
Mhm.
how it'll be used. So taking these early looks, and nobody else has done this. It was a shock to Tara and I. So how we look at and ask engineers and technologists how they're using it in the workflow. We don't approach it, just so for everybody knows, regarding marketing. We're very interested in this particular study by how are the engineers using it. And then you could take from there and you start to think about lack of personnel, lack of training. I need more. I'm asked to do more. I'm involved in multiple phases. AI comes into play. Listen, AI is not new. It's been around for 4 or 5 years, but the intensity of it and its application of use of ease has gotten better, right? Obviously, we see that. So that quick adoption to utilize this to get redundancy out of the mundane work that engineers have to do, I think that drives a lot of this. Um, okay, and the types of AI they use. So it's not all inclusive, but pretty closely. It gives you, the higher model is Copilot, Gemini, or the large language models, along with chat. But design assistance and code generation. So these three pretty much are dominated. I'm not sure what product selection, other than that's investigative and things like that, or image generation. I think that's more on the lower end of things. But code generation, design assistance, and language models dominate currently the AI use. And it's pretty even between the different communities, which is ironic when you look back here and you see in these areas. A little point on test and validation, by the way, that I know it's near and dear to your heart, Joel. But one of the biggest investments, and I picked up the other day, one of the biggest investments in the C-suite as an average is in R&D and test and measurement for CapEx. So that's encouraging to me
Huh.
because we're seeing more and more engineers
Yeah, I haven't
utilizing
seen
AI.
that. I
Hmm.
haven't
I'll
seen
send it
that in
to
a
you.
long
I'll
time.
send it to
Yeah,
you.
the T&M market that we work
Yeah,
with, I would love to see
yeah,
that.
yeah. Just a shout out to Test Equity. Great company. They have a lot of great data in test and measurement. I'm not promoting them. I'm just saying they got a lot of good data out there that you could get some indications from. Types of AI already kind of covered. The overall sentiments kind of furthering the end of this, and that is it's very positive, much more. Much more. It's by 30+% for the Millennial Z that it's not going to be negative to my role, to my job. Jury's still out for a lot of the seniors, and these may be people that just have underutilization. They're not there yet. With more of this community, which again dominates the overall community. Okay, we'll get into sourcing. Now they got to get the product, right? So here's interesting. We'll talk about NPI. Joel brought up NPI. Last year, 2025, best guess based on a couple of major distributors that probably control 80% of the NPI for componentry into the industries. You got about 40,000 NPIs that were announced last year. Think about that for a minute. 40,000 NPIs, and I'm an engineer and I got to worry about shit. I got to be able to do this. I got to be able to do that. And we saw that one of the key things they mentioned on, things that were impacting them, and that is new product technologies. It was like in the top 5 or 6 on areas of, concern or areas that are overwhelmingly challenging. Wow. So again, it's not search engine bubble to the top, right? So, here's how they find out. They go to the manufacturer's website, the distributor website, lesson down there. I think a lot more manufacturers doing better jobs on that. But this gives you a clear, other than social media. Again, another flag, green flag that pulls out millennial Z in their social media, in their thought processing that's different and distinguishably activated differently than career pros. So other than that, they're pretty, and then of course, engineering communities.
Yeah, I will register the same surprise here that we talked about earlier about social. But the second one there, articles or blogs on industry websites, we're seeing that on the manufacturer websites as well, that the bulk of the traffic that is coming in is not necessarily just on, main product pages and website pages, but on the blogs that companies are publishing. So not surprised to see it up at number 2. It's a primary driver for marketing activity, at least. Okay. And again, search engine number 4. Holy moly! We'll all be forgetting Google one of these days, right?
Yeah, maybe. I'm sure they'll have something to say. Yeah. If you remove all the product specs, if you will, what's another area that they look at in deciding for new product NPI? Because I think NPI is important with this rapid evolving change of technologies and introduction. So if you remove all the product specs, take a look, and I think it's pretty universally agreed in the top 5. It's how you get down here. Company reputation, ease of use, lead time, and peer reviews. Peer reviews, of course, which leads to, and probably even company reputation leads to more social and communities that they're talking to each other. But clearly, you got to have right now, here's what's funny to me, Joel, is that price, whether it was an engineer or a supply chain purchasing buyer, price was always number 1. Well, but when you isolate, back in the days when everything was kind of put in the same list, but if you take out all the product specs, now you see where price falls.
Well, that's right. Performance and specs has always been dominant. We talk a lot about price not being the number 1 or even number 2 deciding factor. It's typically 3, 4, 5. So not surprised to see it there.
A couple of things, I'll just point out on this. That's not here. You look at the biggest challenges when you're adopting new technologies, and there's high upfront cost. So ROI is a bit uncertain, right? Then you got to integrate with legacy systems. And if you're dealing with lack of skilled workforce and you've got these new technologies, adaptation that's being forced upon you, prominent, a little bit of an issue. So I think, it's bigger than some of the earlier stats we saw where new technologies, yes, but why are they driving a challenge? And that is, I think, because of high upfront cost, right? And the ROI, especially now in this environment, it's hard. And the integration in legacy systems probably doesn't apply so dramatically to auto, mil-aero, right? But those more interchangeable, rapidly changed out industries, certainly it's huge. Okay. How about the manufacturer, right? When you're looking as the most important thing, and if you're web ready, site ready, the consideration, what are the manufacturing factors? What is it that I look for? Again, look down here. I made earlier mention about certification. Your counterfeit came up, right? I think that doesn't surprise me, this pull out here, up here. And again, I think that millennials, this will start to level out and be more lineal.
Why do you think the products are and a counterfeit number is so much higher for millennials and career pros?
I think product certification has been a problem for a lot of companies. Meaning, if you look at some of the three big companies on data out there, right? Like Silicon Expert, Z2, the former IHS, which is Acrisure now. Those three dominant companies have always been the go-to source for certification and counterfeit. Well, basically certification. It's always been there, but you go to most manufacturing sites, certification, go look for documentation to support, other than app notes, data sheets, reference designs, look for certification of compliance. This is the hardest freaking thing to find.
Yeah.
It
Okay.
may be unfamiliar. Maybe a large portion of this respondent base. Tara will have to break it out for me. I don't have it handy. Maybe half that number are engineers, millennial Zs, more towards the Z level, and maybe they have
Yeah.
5 years experience.
Yeah, it
So
could be.
they
And they were
are,
decided, they were assigned the
yes,
task
yes.
of going to to find certification and compliance information. That's probably their role. Yeah.
See, it's all those nuances, right,
Yeah.
Joel? How
Yeah.
do you figure out my spend to tell somebody something? You really need to incorporate all these kind of things, this type of information, to make sure that you're hitting the mark and intersecting. You want to be where, let's put it this way, you need to be where your customers are.
Yep.
And if your customers are in communities and forums or certain websites or whatever, that's where you need to be, where you take a look at it. And that's what's driving a lot of the investment, I think. Um, be, to, be site ready. Be site ready. Distributors, a little different. And look, once again, down here, Joe. So I think
Yeah.
it is an assignment issue. You're
Yeah.
absolutely. Website usability falls less. I think more seasoned pros may have more familiarity, and you see that in the branding portion of this study. And again, when you get the full version, folks, if you go online to eetech.com, there's branding portions that can be presented to you by giving brand equity status over 100 companies. So take a look at that. We got questions, or
Yeah,
do I
so
need
we
to
do
pull it
have
back up?
we have some incredible questions, and we actually have way more than we typically have. Not surprised. And while we won't get through to all of them on the time that we have today, Steve and I will share the questions and try to publish it back out to the group with some answers. But one of them I am going to answer because it's near and dear to my heart is how is AI search versus traditional search engine evolved? Do you have a breakout of data between AI and traditional search? So, I'll answer that and then turn it over to you, Steve. I mean,
Mhm.
AI search is just blowing up the whole SEO, AEO, GEO world. So organic traffic for many companies is declining. Some studies are pointing to the number I heard this morning is 58% of searches end without a click, meaning that people are getting the answer at the top of Google and they don't need to click to read more or to go to the manufacturer's website. So it is getting tougher and tougher for a marketer to get people to our websites. I will tell you that we're also tracking the amount of AI traffic coming into websites from ChatGPT, Perplexity, Copilot. It's amazing that about 95% of the traffic we see coming into client sites come from ChatGPT. It's very much like the old Google paradigm where, if you weren't listed on Google, you weren't listed anywhere. That's still the case, but for AI engines, if your company, your products, your specs are not included on ChatGPT, your AI footprint is pretty small. So, Steve, any rebuttal? Any?
I don't know about a rebuttal. Add on, certainly, Joel. I still think a lot of the jury's still out on AI. We don't have any particular information about the industry where traffic is coming to from an organic standpoint, or is it, how's that relating to Google search, if you will, or organic search? I will say this. I don't see a big difference. If I'm into Google and I'm searching, the minute I launch Google, it's AI mode.
Yep,
So what's the difference?
that's right. Yeah.
Yeah,
So,
yeah. So we
yeah,
got
and
to
I know a
pre.
lot of. Go
Go
ahead.
ahead. Go ahead.
Well,
I
I
lost my
was going to
thought
say
for a
a
minute.
lot of younger people are not using Google primarily anymore. They're using chat. The numbers there are still smaller than Google, but And as chat, OpenAI already has announced, beta level ad sales. I'm sure Google's going to be incorporating that into their AI offering, very, very soon. There's no way that these engines can't monetize that. So it is going to change a lot, but it's the no click, the zero click paradigm that as a marketer, we're most concerned about and we're watching the most. We have got to get our content included in these AI answers.
You have to be relevant. You have to be relevant. That's for me personally, I try to I don't use AI to generate my messaging, my emails. I don't. I want to stay authentic. Do I use it? Yeah, now and then. Of course I do, or for other things. But authenticity, verification, I need to control. I've seen too many. I get emails at times that I know are AI generated. I have two tools that I utilize to determine whether that content is or isn't. I can't tell you sometimes I'll get through the first paragraph, get done. This is
Yeah,
irrelevant.
those AI generated outbound emails, there's a million services that are pushing those. They are just not having much traction and results and impact at all. It's a little bit too early stage, I think. It sounds great. Oh, I can go into their persona and pull messaging that's really relevant and combine it with your brand platform, but it's just not showing traction yet that we've seen.
Yeah,
All right, here's a great question for you,
Yeah,
Steve.
go ahead. Go ahead.
Can you discuss sales depending too much on AI?
Oh yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah,
Well,
I
you
got
only
my
have 5 minutes
flight.
to talk about
No,
it.
I'm not going to take it all, but I'll say this, listen, I'm a sales guy at heart. I'm not an engineer. I mean, I've been fortunate to, through osmosis to learn quite a bit from technical experts and engineers over the years. But end of the day, I'm the easy sales guy. I want the big red button. I want the easy sale. Hit it. That's it. The dependency, they're in talk to certain suppliers. I will say this: they are in the throes currently of building use guidelines of AI to their marketing sales department, especially sales departments. I've had 3 companies come forward and say we have now implemented our guideline sectors, for AI use, and in that is validation, authentication, of content. And that's the biggest problem that engineers have when utilizing, is the error factor, right? I've got data on that. You could see it in some of the other research that we have, but I'll go back to salespeople. Be authentic. You will be detected. You will be challenged if you're using AI to generate and maximize without validation and verification authenticity on your own. Check when you generate something before it goes
Yep.
anywhere.
Yep. Can't agree more. Last
Yeah.
question.
Yes, sir.
And this is interesting. If manufacturing sites are the source for NPI information, new product information, and we saw that on several survey answers, right? Manufacturer websites is the #1 place to go. Does that also indicate that these engineers have an already established preference to which manufacturer site they go to? I'll let you answer that, Steve, and then I'll answer too.
Yeah, let's harken back to AVLs, right, team? So
Yeah.
approved vendor list. I don't know when the last time I talked to an engineering team in a small enterprise S&M all the way up to, Fortune levels. They all work through for the most part, especially now on AVLs. So if you're working off an approved vendor list. That being said, you're going to be utilizing in your partnership with securing sourcing. That is your list that you work with. Getting qual, especially in mil aero, auto, forget about it. If you're not in the ABL, you're not in, right? Unless it's a fulfillment issue, that market tweak or what have you. So that's my
Well, I
opinion
will
on
say
that.
that a lot of companies don't have it that we talk to and that are in our sales pipelines. A lot of those
Mhm.
companies do not have AVLs, so they're not limited to that. So now we're talking about the difference between brand awareness and brand preference. Do engineers have a locked in brand preference company? And at what point in their careers do they get locked in? We've done research on our own that asked about awareness and preference and broke it out by age demographic, as you have
Mhm.
here. And we found that the career pro, the senior seasoned engineers, man, they are locked in to the company provider. Getting them to switch is very, very difficult. It requires a true
Mhm.
technical innovation. The younger engineer, much more fluid. they do not have their brand preference locked in yet. So that group is easier to move from a competitor company to you.
Just one rebuttal on that. When I speak about AVLs, I'm talking about your customer's customer. I'm talking about the Bose, the Apples of the world, Milwaukee Weldings, different variety of sizes of companies. That's what I'm talking about, AVLs, right? So, engineers coming out, especially a larger enterprise, they are limited to an AVL. That's what those engineers could pick. They've already been pre-qualified. Multiple choices for the same technology, but it's your choice. You're right. Brand equity, brand preference, and we approach that in the full version. When anybody goes to download, and I'd be happy to take you through it, we go unaided all the way through aided and then forced aided. We have 3 levels of equity being assessed. And I think that's the one way you could take a look at what Joel's is offering a perspective. And you're spot on, Joel. It's clear in that brand equity slides in the back of this larger study. It is clear that career pros are set. And if you match that up to the same equation with Millennial Z, it's all over the map.
All over the map.
Undecided.
Right. Well, listen, I'm going to thank everybody for joining us. Steve, I think you and I have said an awful lot of smart things in the last hour.
I don't know about that.
I appreciate everybody joining us today. As promised, we will send you these slides. We will send you the recording. It will be available on demand, and we're really grateful. Reach out to Steve or myself. Contact information is at the end if you'd like to discuss anything in more detail or maybe even pull out some specific numbers that you'd like to see.
Yeah, thanks, Joel. Thanks for the opportunity, Joel. Everybody that took time out of your day, thank you very much. And do as Joel said. If you got any questions for me or Joel, email us. We're here to answer. Thanks again. Cheers.
Thanks so much. Bye-bye.